Hey there, you're listening to Risk Required, the series and book all about the inside track to finance, the tips and tricks that could allow you to find financial freedom and retire from the 9 to 5, just like Ed Pitford did, aged just 32. I'm Gareth Barlow, and joining me is Ed, the man with the financial Midas touch, an investor, entrepreneur, and now author. The information and opinions in this podcast are provided for informational and educational purposes only and do not constitute financial advice. The presenter, production and publisher are not responsible or liable for any analysis made by the audience based on the information in this recording. No parties warrant or guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information. Audiences should always do their own research or consult an independent financial advisor who will advise based on the individual's specific circumstances. We've talked about you, your upbringing, family life, being gay, cream teas in Dorset. We've talked about debt and how it's empowered you to do things. You've talked about how you can potentially, if you are overwhelmed by debt, slowly work your way out of that cycle and break free of the impacts of that. And then also how you've invested, not just in businesses, but also in international currency, in ideas as well. And we alluded to at the beginning and in the introduction in episode 1 about your time and interest and involvement in politics. Why? You're doing just fine at 32. You've earned plenty of money. You could just chill. You kind of, as we say, retired effectively and kind of living the easy life. Politics is far from easy. What drew you into it? Why do it?
Yeah, I do ask myself that sometimes. And I definitely think it's one of those things that you enter because you don't know what it's all about. Otherwise, you would not enter. So it all started in 2017. I wrote to Theresa May and I said, could we do this, this and this? I had some ideas for the country. I was kind of getting frustrated with
financial ideas?
Some were slightly financial. Yeah, it kind of, about how the rules around what you could borrow and where you could invest, but also simpler things like could we legislate on LED halogen bulbs, get rid of halogen bulbs and make them LED, which was a complete no-brainer for everybody really. For the individual, that's a 200% return on switching out your light bulbs. There's a 90% reduction in carbon, and then it would have boosted British GDP by 0.25% if we all switched out our bulbs. So a great thing for everybody there, and it would have been a very easy legislative switch for the government. I found out that we couldn't do it because we were in the EU. So actually, one benefit of leaving the EU was that we could legislate on our own light bulbs. Yeah, I wrote to her and she didn't reply. So I was like, fine, I'll do it myself, which is a kind of stubborn child in me. So I joined the party, the Conservative Party, and started campaigning with them, etc. And then when I quit my job at the end of 2019, I could get more heavily involved. And within a week, I was in a room with all the cabinet helping with campaigns, and I just kind of couldn't quite understand how I'd got to that position. Like, did they invite me by mistake or whatever? But I was there. And they were. You
say the cabinet. Westminster City Council or the cabinet at Downing Street?
The Downing Street cabinet. It was part of Boris Johnson's campaign, and it was a media event, and they kind of wanted people there to hold placards, and they'd say how many nurses, and we'd all reply with the number, but I was kind of very neutral with this. I didn't know all the numbers. So there's a very awkward clip somewhere of me not knowing the answers. And then I was also trying to hold the strong economy banner and not the get Brexit done banner. But that footage someday will haunt my political career, I'm sure. The access was incredible because I was right at the heart of Westminster. So being an activist in Westminster, suddenly you're exposed to all these great things. So yeah, I worked my way up, doing a lot of phoning people up and knocking on doors, and got myself selected as a candidate for Pimlico North, and then elected in May of 2022 as a councillor in Westminster.
I think it's important to understand your political colours. You said, so I joined the Conservative Party. But you wrote to Theresa May to talk about halogen light bulbs. You invested in 2009 into a company that reduced the aero drag on trucks in 2011-12, you joined Octopus Energy, a company that's renewables. If I was to paint a picture of political colours, I'd be painting a green picture. Surely these all sound like very green policies, but you didn't go green, you went blue.
Yeah, and politics is full of choices. So if I look at me as a person, yes, I'm green. I'm also quite liberal, because growing up gay in the kind of system, you fight against it a bit. But then fiscally, I'm quite conservative. So I believe in the small government, the kind of letting me take on my own risk, and instead of telling me what risk I can or cannot take, and encouraging small businesses. And so all that stuff sits with the Conservative Party. I want to someday be in a position where I'm making decisions, and you can't get to that unless your party's in power. So basically my choice then is Conservative or Labour. And then it's where do I more naturally align? And if I look at my views politically, like none of those, blue, yellow or green, were red. So Conservative is the place for me. And from the inside, I can slowly move them more green. They are going more green and more liberal, but actually they were reasonably liberal already. It was David Cameron that brought in gay marriage and actually opened that up. So it might sound strange, but actually it's not a bad place for me to be.
And you talk about making the party more green. You are a councillor for Westminster City Council, and we said in the introduction you have taken £1.8 billion worth and aligned them to Paris fund.
So the pension is worth 1.8 billion. The funds that we moved over, it was about 400 million into a Paris-aligned fund, and then we've got other stuff that's invested in direct assets such as renewables and so on.
And then what was that, about 90 million or so?
Yeah, it's an 11% allocation now, so we added 90 million to what we had. But it's not just me, so there's four of us on the committee, but I very much push that to be on the agenda and move it forward as an item. I haven't always been successful. There's other stuff I've tried to move them to do and haven't quite succeeded. But yeah, that's probably one of my kind of most rewarding achievements to actually have that kind of impact. When I was at Octopus, I could invest tens of millions into renewable energy, but it was always, I guess, someone else making those top decisions, and this suddenly is a quirk of local government that four councillors, not necessarily with experience in finance, get to run a £1.8 billion pension fund.
A double-headed question for you. To what degree does your involvement, interest, success, ultimately, in investing influence your politics, and vice versa?
I mean, I do remember trying to push forward an agenda at Octopus, and this very senior person, head of investments, telling me, no, that's in the realm of the political. And we had to get back in the room on that. So I was trying to get full divestment from anything to do with gas at that point, when actually it's part of the transition, is how they saw it. But it was difficult when I went to present as Octopus, and people were like, what about your gas investments? And so it would have been a lot cleaner just to be in renewables. I guess I come to everything with a very analytical finance mind. I get frustrated when I see papers that are written that say no financial impact, when actually, there's staff time writing that paper for a start. There's definitely a financial impact of whatever is being discussed. And so I guess it's a much harsher financial view on everything I see when it comes to politics. But also, I think that works really well. This is the public's money, and I want to make sure we spend it wisely and look after it properly. And we therefore have to take risks with it. Just like when you're investing for yourself, when you're investing for the pension fund or for a country, you have to take some risks so you make some gains so you can afford to pay for everything that you're doing. I know kind of Liz Truss's plan, growth, didn't work out, but actually the concept of that is needed. We need to grow to be able to afford everything that people expect in terms of the NHS, the housing, the mental health support we all want. All of these things cost money, and we won't get there unless we're taking risk, making profit, taxing that profit, and investing it into the country.
It's maybe easy to think of politics and investing as thinking about business rates, for example, or the parameters that banks can lend money, or what you can do as an individual investor, and some of those big kind of macro decisions that governments make on our behalf or after an election or whatever. But governments also dictate school curriculums, for example, and whether we learn maths or finance. And you are in a system that could help dictate some of that and help shape some of that, depending on how far you go down that political journey. And we talked in one of the earlier episodes about the fact that most people learn about simultaneous equations and algebra rather than mortgages or debt or finance or credit cards and all those things. You potentially could have the capacity to change that. Would you change that? How would you change that?
Yeah, and it's something I'd love to change. There's not enough financial education in this country. I think we're kind of all appreciate that. Like when I left university, I didn't have a lot of financial education. I was there working at Tesco, not understanding everything financially, and then realised actually I need to learn this a bit more, and kind of went to business school and upskilled in that. But that's not an option open to everyone, and it'd be far better if we had that base level at school that could help us, because we're expected to, take on credit cards and mortgages and make investments, and all of these things, they're complex, they're difficult, and it's not saying you can't do them. I do still believe everyone can understand it, but it takes some effort, and it does seem sensible to teach that in schools. I'm not saying we should get rid of simultaneous equations, etc. They are valuable in terms of learning how to learn, but to add financial education there would be so useful, and should improve everyone's ability in the country, and just make us cautious. I know that part of the problem is that the economy relies on people spending to grow, and it might slow that. There's kind of scary statistics if people save £5 more a month, that would push us towards recession. But if we can all actually start investing, then, as I say, that generates profits, and the profits get taxed, and it all comes back in.
So how do you view then the relationship between politics and money?
They're completely intertwined, aren't they? That's why the Treasury is kind of such a high position within the cabinet, and everyone relies on the Treasury to give them their budgets to go and do what they want to within the country. Picking where that money goes is really, really important. From top all the way to the bottom, finance is the thing that runs things and dictates behaviour. Look at the campaign I've been running recently on parking charges for electric vehicles in Westminster, and putting those parking charges up for electric vehicles will undoubtedly feed through to how many electric vehicles are driven. So money is dictating people's behaviour all the way through. We aren't always rational. Like, people buy iPhones when they can't necessarily afford them. But it's definitely nudging people each way. So yeah, finance is critical, and a good understanding of finance is very important in becoming a politician.
It would be amiss of me not to touch on your identity at this point. It didn't really feature, certainly in the who you are, who you were born, what you were born as, you as an individual in the second and third episodes. I guess it has done, because it exhibits over how you view risk, etc. But I think you know where I'm going with this. You touched on being a gay man and how that led you to want to be independent and stand on your own 2 feet. How do you feel as a gay man in the Conservative Party?
So it's something I question. I kind of check in with myself. Is what's okay? Is this okay? And so on. But when you look at the facts, they have done so much against, but also for the gay community. And I come back to gay marriage again. Like David Cameron bringing that in, he used up a lot of political capital to deliver that, and it's something that's kind of wonderful for our community.
Well, I'm a gay man, I have a wedding ring on.
Yeah, and that wouldn't have happened without the Conservatives. So the Conservatives aren't naturally anti-gay. They have said things recently that I do disagree with around trans people. That I really struggle with. It doesn't mean you just resign the party and walk away. There will be things that you disagree with other people in the party. Like, the party is trying to cover probably roughly 40% of the country. So you're definitely going to disagree with people in there. But it's about staying and fighting and holding your ground and persuading people that your way of thinking is actually a fairer way of thinking. When it comes to the trans community, the party has been unfair on them, and we need to do more to make them feel included and valued. And it's just part of the natural diversity of life that there are trans people and there are gay people and bi people and the whole range. And there's no reason that we should exclude or not strive to include these people in society. So yeah, I was very disappointed by that, but that's not going to make me quit the party. That's going to make me stay and try and fight harder. And you kind of came back to, why am I not on a beach, effectively? Why am I in politics? And it's because of things like that. I feel like I want my voice to be heard at the table, whether it's finance or trans or any other issue in the country, I feel like I have some value to add there.
Which is interesting, because many people in your position, put politics aside, many people in your position financially, independently, as a young man, you could just do your own thing. You could walk your own path. You could keep it all to yourself. Your opinions, your money, your thoughts, your values. You could avoid scrutiny. You could avoid opening up your inner sanctum of your mind and what's near and dear and important to you. But you've decided not to. And in entering politics, there is obviously, surely then, interest, scrutiny on what you do and who you are as a businessman. Does that concern you? Does that influence what you do?
I've always tried to invest with a kind of certain moral compass, avoiding oil, trying to invest in green stuff and good stuff. And there is actually, we haven't really touched on it in the investing bit, there's quite a lot of good you can do with your investments and your choices. People are always going to find something they don't like about me or what I've done, but I feel like I have a reasonably clean slate and should stand up to that scrutiny. I'd love to be on a beach, but the more I'm in politics, the more I feel that side of the argument needs to be there. It's quite rare to be in politics this young, and I think the youth are quite underrepresented when it comes to politics, and so just being at the table I feel is quite important. And I know I'd love it if it was like jury service, if everyone had to be a politician for a year or 4 years, and we'd rotate it round, and then we'd get a real cross-section of society.
You want the ancient Greek version of direct democracy, do you? You want to go back to those days?
It would be, I think there is a benefit to that, because to run, you have to have a huge amount of time, drive, money helps, not to buy votes, but to be able to afford to put the time towards that instead of earning money. And so to democratize that out a bit more by pushing people through it, perhaps paying the politicians better so that it's a more affordable job to do. But it's a harsh environment. You have to get selected and campaign with no guarantee of a job at the end of it. So that bit you're investing, and with no guaranteed return. And then the salaries are not amazing. They're very good, some of them, like they're more than the average salary. But if we're expecting top people to take a time out of their careers and potentially risk their whole career progression, we've got to offer a little more.
It's a very true version of risk required, isn't it? As much as investing is putting yourself out there and seeing whether people vibe with you or want to vote for you and back you and support you, and then have you as their representative in council or in parliament or wherever.
But it's a risk required without the return. it's you're definitely not going to get a financial return out of it. And yes, you might have power and some fame, but it's not really going to be proportionate to what you put into it. I feel like I have a lot more respect for MPs now than I did when I started this journey, because what they put themselves through is pretty unbearable. You're going to have abuse online. You're going to have people expecting to have a say in how you live your life. You're not going to be able to go on holiday like you used to. All of these things restricting you for no real gain. It's not like when you put all of that into a finance career.
But there is gain, surely, because afterwards you go and work as a director on a fancy company, or you have the gain of being able to influence politics and influence legislation and be amongst movers and shakers. It's not all financial.
Yeah, but I'm amongst those people, but I'm not. I don't have like a £1 billion business to influence them for. So the return on that is very low. And the chance I can persuade them to change a tax, like, that might help me by 2% or something, but I probably won't be able to. So yeah, it's nice to be at the table, it's interesting, but I'm not going to get the financial return that the lobbyists get, and they're the ones who are putting real money into making sure they're at the table. Yes, some people go on to write books and do the speaking circuit, but they're the minority. There's every one of them, there'll be thousands who tried and didn't get selected, or tried and got elected and did one term or did 1 year, and there's a mass underneath that don't really see any gain.
To what degree is there an inherent bonus leg up when it comes to entering politics from having wealth? You talked about it to a degree, certainly from a point of a councillor. The old view is that being a councillor is kind of part-time. It's in addition to what you're doing already. But I know more than one councillor, and they are very busy people. Did wealth enable you to do politics? And if so, to what degree?
I mean, it helped hugely, because I think even if it's not like you buying a seat at the table, but you can, when you're going to a selection committee, you can say, look, I've got all this time I can dedicate to it because I don't need to be in the office. So that would have helped a huge amount. There are plenty of Westminster councillors who do have day jobs and try and do it on top, but that would be really, really difficult. Your social life is definitely out, your weekends are out, and then the quality of your work has to suffer because there's just no way you can do it in that time. To do it well, I could do it. I could do it as a full-time job, and I still could do better. There is a huge amount there, and I always used to wonder why do they need 3 councillors for each ward? Isn't that overkill? But now I understand it because there's so much. There's so many emails, etc., come in, so many committees to sit on, so many decisions to make. It just soaks up time, and it's a very different world to the investment firm where you could just make a decision and it happened. You have to win people over and persuade them. It's a good lesson for me.
You must be very cognizant, though, that not very many people are like you, and thus to have the full representation of society in politics, that barrier to entry and being able to do the job successfully means that some people just won't be able to do it. And there are brilliant minds and people who represent communities and diversity and minorities that perhaps can't enter politics, or if they do, can't make a success of it because they don't have that ability in 2019 or so, when they're age 32, to semi-retire. Would you want to see change in the system, and if so, to what degree, to allow more people to do what you do? Surely that'd be better for everyone.
Yeah, and as I say, I'd like to see it almost compulsory, so people have to give it a go and experience it, and then they kind of see the other side of it, the difficult decisions that have to be made. In terms of financially, I thought about it when I joined. I was like, I'm putting quite a lot of money into doing this, even if it's just paying to go to the local fundraiser dinner and drinks or whatever. And then I was like, well, we could have a kind of scholarship to help people. And then I was like, but actually then it's starting to involve money in it. Like, are you then, who selects who gets the money? And then that will become political, and it's a real difficult world. I think our system, like, for all its faults, it's not actually that bad. We keep money out of it quite well compared to the likes of the United States, and we seem to keep corruption out of it pretty well as well. Yes, I'd like to see it more accessible. I think the way to do that is, as I say, probably to increase salaries of MPs, etc., so that once you've taken that risk, when you get there, it's more worthwhile. But it's hard. We've had a lot of intelligent people looking at this, and this is the system we've got. If I had a silver bullet, I'd have shouted about it by now because I would want it to be in place. But no, I don't have all the answers.
I shan't ask you and make you responsible for reforming political systems in the UK or anywhere else. But I do want to kind of quote you back on yourself. And that's with regards to the introduction. Your political journey whilst young is still impressive. Elected to Westminster City Council in 2022, in 18 months succeeded in switching the £1.8 billion pension fund to Paris-Line funds, allocating a further £90 million to renewable energy projects, sitting on the Planning Committee, the Environment and Highway Scrutiny Committee, and Deputy Whip for the Minority Party in 18 months. What's next?
Kind of looking at my journey, I guess, councillor, MP would be the next step, but that's not something I want to do yet. I'm kind of leaving that till I'm kind of in my head targeting 2029. I don't think I want to do that as a single person. I feel like it will take quite a mental toll, and I kind of want some backup there and some support. And also you've got to go and probably live somewhere else for 6 months while you campaign, and then you've got to go there every weekend. It's all consuming. So now I've learned more about what an MP involves. I want to kind of take a bit of time and check that that's really, really what I want to put myself through before I do it, and make a bit more of an informed decision, and also do a little bit more travelling and so on while I have the freedom.
We've talked for 4 episodes, a couple of hours, give or take, about you, about debt, finance, politics, your upbringing, being gay, being involved in the world of business and success. You've also written a book, and there's the audio version as well, available for people to listen to. At the end of all of this, what do you hope the listeners taken away from this?
I want the listeners to embrace risk, because that is needed, as I keep going on about, to feel empowered to take some of those decisions themselves. And remember that the banks all have an agenda. Every financial advisor, and they have an agenda around fees. Your parents had it a lot easier in terms of affordability of housing, etc. So to take some ownership of that and some empowerment, that you can actually make some of these financial decisions. You have the capability, and so hopefully people will just nudge themselves into investing a bit, and hopefully help some people out of some scary levels of debt, and just put the financial health of the country on a slightly better track. Thanks for listening to my podcast. For everything the banks don't want you to know, you'll find the details in my book, Risk Required, out soon.